It started with a small laugh. Not cruel, not sharp, just the kind that escapes when someone can't take a moment seriously. She did that a lot. I used to think it was charming. A nervous reflex, maybe. The way her lips would tighten for half a second before she exhaled through her nose. I'd ask her out for dinner, and she'd smile like she was sorry. Maybe next week, she'd say, or I've got a lot on my mind. Always gentle, never final. The softness was the worst part. It gave me hope, which was worse than a straight no. Every evening I'd sit in my car a little too long before driving home. Radio off. Streetlight bleeding through the windshield. Thinking of the things I didn't say. Thinking how small my life had become around the idea of her. I told myself it was persistence, not obsession. That if I just waited, she'd see I meant it. I started timing my visits, dropping by when I knew she'd be home, pretending I forgot something. Each time, she'd open the door just wide enough. That thin line of space became its own kind of conversation. She'd talk from behind it, leaning her head around the frame, hair loose, eyes cautious but kind. I always left before she had to ask me to. That was my dignity. I never crossed the line, but I stood right up against it. She had this way of holding a cup with both hands, even when it wasn't hot, like she needed to keep herself steady. I watched that and thought it was grace. Now I think it was distance. She didn't want her hands free. She didn't want them to move toward me. I told her once quietly, no grand confession, that I liked her. She smiled. The kind of smile that tells you she wishes you hadn't said it. Not because she's cruel, but because she already knows she hurt you. You shouldn't, she said. You'll regret it. I laughed like it was nothing. I told her regret was familiar. It was a line meant to sound confident, but it came out tired. After that, things grew thinner. Shorter replies, longer pauses. She'd still talk, still let me in for tea sometimes, but there was a clock ticking behind everything she said. I felt it, even when she pretended it wasn't there. I started noticing how she'd glance at the door after every few sentences, like she needed to make sure it was still there. The space between us wasn't physical. It was in the rhythm of her voice, the way she'd look down when she spoke, the careful calm of someone holding a fragile situation. I thought about stopping, about letting it fade, but stopping felt like erasing something real, like undoing a wound before it could scar. I didn't want to be the man she pitied. I wanted to be the man she remembered. So I stayed close, in small, acceptable ways. Casual messages, shared jokes, little reminders that I existed. She didn't push me away, not really. She just learned how to talk without saying much. I could feel the wall building, brick by quiet brick. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels heavy, like a room with too much air. I'd lie awake some nights replaying our last conversations, trimming words, adjusting tone, wondering what I could have said differently. But nothing ever sounded right in my head. The truth was simpler. She didn't want me, and I didn't know how to live without the wanting. I started going out more, pretending to meet friends I didn't have, sitting in bars where nobody knew me, watching couples argue softly over drinks. There's something clean about watching other people fall apart, predictable, contained. You start to envy the ones who can argue, because it means they still have something left to lose. One night, I told her I missed her. No build-up, no charm. Just the words. I expected her to flinch, maybe soften. Instead, she sighed. It was the sound of someone deciding. She said, "You don't miss me. You miss the version of me you made up." It stung because it was true. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. So I just said, "Maybe, but that version feels more real than this one." That was the last real thing we ever said to each other. After that, everything was surface talk, polite, brief, hollow. I started leaving her messages she didn't answer. Each silence felt like a small erasure. One night, I drove to her place again. Didn't knock, just sat outside, watching the light in her kitchen fade out. I realized I didn't want to see her anymore. I just wanted her to think of me. That's when I knew something in me had gone wrong. Love isn't supposed to feel like inventory, keeping count of how much of yourself you've spent. But that's what it became. Every rejection added weight, and I carried it quietly, like a debt I'd never be able to pay off. The night she laughed, really laughed, when I told her I was done trying, it didn't sound cruel. It sounded free, like a door finally closing. I smirked back, but it wasn't pride. It was relief pretending to be strength. I left before she could see how tired I looked. That was the last time we spoke. The rejection wasn't sharp. It was slow, dissolving over weeks until there was nothing left to refuse. And when it was gone, so was I, at least the part of me that believed wanting something enough could make it real. After she stopped answering, my days flattened out. Time lost texture. Mornings were the hardest, waking up with nothing waiting on the other end of consciousness. I'd reach for my phone, check messages that weren't there. The silence didn't hurt anymore, it just sat there, constant, like the hum of a refrigerator you stop noticing until the power goes out. I tried filling the spaces she left behind. Gym, new music, podcasts I didn't listen to. I even joined a photography class for a week, thought maybe capturing things might make them stay. But every photo looked like her absence. I'd frame a street corner, a coffee cup, a half-lit room, and somehow it all came out empty. My instructor said I had a good eye for stillness. I almost laughed. Stillness was all I had. I started tracking the small rhythms of my own life. When I woke, when I ate, how long it took for my tea to cool. The patterns were precise, almost comforting. Routine has a way of disguising loneliness as order. I found that if I wrote everything down, what I did, what I thought, what I avoided, I could make sense of myself in a way that conversation never did. I didn't realize it then, but that was the beginning of the fixation, not on her, but on the idea of control, on knowing where every thought began and ended. I told myself it was self-discipline, a quiet reset. But beneath it was something else, the need to prove I could exist without anyone seeing me. Some nights, I'd scroll through old photos, not of her, but of moments where I thought she might have noticed me. Background smiles, shadows crossing her face, the side of her hand resting on a table near mine. It wasn't longing, it was documentation. Evidence of something that had once almost been real. I started sleeping less. Not insomnia, just an unwillingness to let the day end. The later it got, the quieter everything became. I liked that silence. It was clean, predictable. I'd sit by the window, watching empty streets. Streetlights blinking on schedule. Cars moving through without stopping. There's something soothing about the world running perfectly fine without you, like proof that your absence isn't fatal. I began talking to myself softly, just to break the air. Sometimes I'd say her name, sometimes mine. Both sounded strange, foreign, like borrowed words. I didn't feel sadness anymore. I felt detached, almost clinical. I'd catch myself analyzing old conversations, not to feel them, but to study them. The tone, the phrasing, the pauses, like dissecting something long dead. I realized that was what I had become, a curator of my own failure. I thought about deleting everything, messages, photos, notes, but I couldn't. Deletion felt like forgiveness, and I wasn't ready for that. So I kept it all in folders I never opened, labeled with meaningless dates. One night I found an old voicemail from her. Just a short one, reminding me about a meeting, laughing about something small. I played it twice, then once more, slower. It didn't sound like her anymore. Just a voice suspended in time, untouched by everything that came after. I turned the phone off and sat there in the dark, realizing how easily a person can vanish while their echoes remain. I stopped trying to fix it. I stopped trying to move on. Fixation isn't fire, it's frost. It doesn't burn, it preserves. I learned to function inside it, quietly, like living underwater. Friends stopped checking in, not out of cruelty, just fatigue. I was a story they didn't want to hear again, and I didn't blame them. There's only so many times you can listen to someone talk about a ghost. I noticed new things then, the way dust moved in morning light, the faint hum of pipes behind the walls, how shadows stretched differently in winter. It sounds poetic, but it wasn't, it was data. Observation became survival. The more I noticed, the less I felt. And the less I felt, the steadier I became. One night I caught my reflection in the window, same face, same eyes, but something had shifted. I didn't look tired anymore. I looked emptied out. I think that was the point. To strip away everything that made wanting possible. I told myself it was healing. Maybe it was. Maybe obsession and recovery are just different words for the same process, repetition, until the meaning drains out. I started journaling again, not about her, but about the quiet. The structure of days, the simplicity of existing without demand. I began to like it, the predictability, the lack of interference. I could go a whole day without speaking to anyone and feel fine. Maybe better than fine. There's a kind of peace that comes when nothing is expected of you. When even your own emotions stop making noise. I wondered sometimes if she ever thought of me. Not in a hopeful way, just curiosity, like wondering what happens to a dropped coin. Does it roll somewhere? Does it stop? Does anyone pick it up? I'd imagine her life continuing, full of small, ordinary things. Maybe she still laughs the same way, maybe not, it didn't matter. My world had narrowed to what fit within my walls, my own breathing, my own shadow, my own silence. I realized I wasn't lonely anymore. I was just alone. There's a difference. Loneliness needs an audience. Aloneness is self-sufficient, it feeds itself. That's what the fixation became, a quiet ecosystem of thoughts feeding on their own stillness. When people talk about letting go, they make it sound like release, but it isn't, it's absorption. You don't throw the past away, you digest it until it becomes part of you. I think that's what I did with her. She stopped being a person in my mind. She became texture, a pattern in the background of everything I saw. Familiar, unobtrusive, permanent. I didn't hate her. I didn't love her. I didn't feel much of anything at all. And in a strange way, that felt like freedom. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that just settles in, quiet and complete. Lately the mornings come without weight. I wake because my body decides to, not because I want to. The ceiling looks the same every day. Pale, smooth, empty of meaning. The first sound is always the kettle. It's automatic now, water, click, steam. I drink without tasting. I used to think silence was the absence of sound. Now I know it's the absence of expectation. I've stopped checking the phone. I still keep it near me, out of habit, like an old pet I don't feed anymore. Messages come, mostly work. I answer them with short words, no punctuation at the end. People read them and think I'm tired. They're right, but not in the way they mean. The apartment smells faintly of metal from the radiator. I like it. It's proof of something operating somewhere, heat moving through pipes, purpose without emotion. Sometimes I imagine that's what I've become, a quiet system keeping itself warm. I don't remember when I last dreamed of her. The mind forgets efficiently once it stops rehearsing. If a thought about her appears, it's flat, like a printed image left in the sun too long. No color, no depth. I don't push it away. I just let it fade on its own. Evenings stretch longer now. I read news headlines without opening the articles. There's comfort in information that never touches you. I listen to the refrigerator hum and think about nothing. Sometimes, when traffic outside dies down, I can hear the clock tick 3 rooms away. Each sound lands cleanly, separate from feeling. People tell stories about moving on as if it's movement. For me it's stasis. The world moves, I stay. And yet, this stillness feels earned. I built it piece by piece, stripping away everything that wanted, until wanting itself stopped visiting. A friend asked last week if I was happy. I told him yes. The word came out too easily. It didn't sound false, but it didn't sound true either. Just efficient. At night, I sit by the window. The streetlight flickers twice before settling, always the same pattern. Across the street, a curtain sways when the heater turns on. No people, no drama. Just movement without intent. I think that's what peace looks like from the outside, predictable, symmetrical, a surface without story. Sometimes I wonder if she ever walks by this building. Not because I want to see her, but because part of me wants to test whether I'd feel anything. I imagine it, her figure crossing the pavement, a blur behind the glass. I picture myself watching, expressionless, waiting for recognition that never comes. Then I blink and the thought disappears. It leaves no trace. The silence now isn't empty. It's full of small sounds I never noticed before. The radiator sighs. My own breath makes the curtains tremble. I keep the lights dim, not out of melancholy, but because brightness feels dishonest. I've begun writing shorter sentences in my journal. Fewer adjectives, just facts. Woke at 6:40, rain at 9, no appetite. It feels clean. Truth without decoration. If someone read it, they'd think it was the log of a machine. Maybe that's accurate. There's a photograph on the shelf I haven't touched in months. It's from a trip I barely remembered. Beach, wind, sky the color of salt. She's not in it. I think that's why I kept it. It reminds me that memory doesn't need people to survive. Tonight the sky is low, heavy with cloud. The city light bounces off it, making everything orange and slow. I sit and watch until my eyes adjust. The view doesn't change, but my breathing does, steady, deliberate, measured. I realize I'm not waiting for anything. The awareness is sharp and quiet at once. This is what remains when the noise burns out. Not happiness, not sorrow, just balance. A level so precise it feels unnatural. I know something is missing, but I can't name it anymore. The absence has taken shape. It fits. If she ever thought of me, it would be as someone who finally stopped reaching. Maybe that's true. Maybe I became the silence she always hoped for. I turn off the lamp. The room folds into shadow. For a moment, I listen for a sound that doesn't come, a voice, a knock, anything. When nothing happens, I exhale. The calm that follows isn't comfort, but it's close enough. I close my eyes. The darkness behind them feels exact, measured, complete. I think about nothing, and it feels like arriving.